Hi, I'm Artenise Myrick, the lead organizer with Live Free Illinois. We are a faith based organization geared towards ending mass incarceration, gun violence, and police violence in Black and Brown neighborhoods. And we mobilize those who are directly impacted by systems, as well those of faith communities in the intersection of criminal justice reform and violence prevention. And my daily work at Live Free Illinois is spent helping communities come up with their own vision to be the architects for the reduction of gun violence and to improve our criminal legal system. Live Free Illinois is pleased to join the dozens of organizations and individuals in the Illinois Blueprint for Peace Coalition. We are community groups working on violence prevention, but our coalition also includes legal system reform advocates, community organizers, service providers, attorneys, and many Illinoisans concerned and eager to help with bringing peace to all communities. In this video, you'll learn from our recommendations, which are more than 3 dozen, and we hope that you'll visit our website, which is ilblueprint4peace.org, and read our full report. Perhaps the most important recommendation we have centers the need to invest in communities in the way that enables residents and communities to heal from the trauma caused by racial and gun violence. From racial inequities and gun violence, and to build stronger neighborhoods. The idea for the Blueprint for Peace originated last year with the Symposium on Gun Violence, a symposium sponsored by the Children and Family Justice Center at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. We examined and debated why people carry guns and how the criminal justice system responds to gun carrying and more sustainable approaches to reduce violence. After that day-long reflection, we spent weeks creating a blueprint for peace to build towards even more peace for communities. In America today, any spike in crime is followed by someone calling for police and longer prison sentences. There is nothing more than politicians looking for sound bites and quick fixes. There are no solutions and have not produced peace. By comparison, our recommendations are totally out of the ordinary. They're non-traditional and have shown to be successful with sustained commitment. While the easy access to guns has helped fuel violence in our communities, a war on guns alone will fail just as the nation's war on drug has failed. Instead, we must act on the lessons learned from the failed war on drugs. Whether drugs or guns, demand and harmful use decrease when people are healthy and they feel safe. Demand and use increase when people cannot heal from trauma and they feel afraid. Whether drugs or guns, healing resources must be immediately accessible to all. Whether drugs or guns, positive outlets and support do more to reduce harm than legal responses ever will. And whether drugs or guns, intensive policing, extra long sentencing aimed at individual possession will never sufficiently prevent death. But they can create new harm that destabilize families and communities and ultimately drive up the demand for drugs or guns. And so now, for the details of our recommendations, here is Gary and Gatewood, the director of the Illinois Justice Project.
The recommendations in the Illinois Blueprint for Peace follow three primary areas. First, Illinois should invest in health and healing of the residents impacted by gun violence. The recommendations include increased mental health support to aid recovery from trauma experienced by those directly and indirectly impacted by gun violence. We also call for increased funding to encourage youth participation in gun violence prevention efforts. Second, Illinois should redesign the criminal processes by transparency and fairness and adding community voice to gun charging decisions in the court. This includes ending the frequent presumption that cases involving mere gun possessions, not use, should be charged as harshly as possible. Instead, they should be charged as misdemeanors. Third, Illinois should improve sentencing and policy integrity by promoting compliance with gun laws, not simply punishing violations. This will require educating, training, and licensing many thousands of Illinoisans who already have access to weapons but have had insufficient exposure to safe gun practices and to the legal framework around guns in Illinois. Recommendations include ending the characterization of possession-oriented and licensing violations as gun crimes, a category indistinguishable on paper from gun violence and resulting in misinterpretation that creates barriers to securing housing and employment. Let's look in more detail at the recommendations regarding health and healing of residents impacted by gun violence. Communities are most knowledgeable about the problems affecting their residents. We should increase funding of community-based organizations, and don't just provide money. Let's help organizations get technical assistance and other support they need to ensure success and be able to help their communities far in the future. Let's incorporate services, mental health, mentoring, and much more into schools to involve parents and the rest of the community. Let's do more to help our young people. We're talking summer jobs, but also year-round employment for youth, as well as those emerging adults in their early 20s. Let's ask people in each community what they need to prevent violence. There's no one size fits all approach to gun violence reduction across diverse communities here in Illinois. Let's encourage more use of restorative justice. It is diffuse arguments and repair harm in nonviolent situations. Restorative justice can also heal in violent encounters as well. Let's recognize people leaving prison need help rebuilding their lives, and that will benefit all of us. People returning home often struggle to cope with incarceration related trauma and to find their new role in an environment that may have changed drastically since they left it. We need investments in community based organizations focused on reentry assistance to help find housing and services. Finally, our communities have a story to tell about what works and what doesn't work to bring peace to their neighborhoods. Police readily give the news media their spin on crime, but communities live it day by day and have a perspective on what can be done to reduce gun violence and how they've been treated in the criminal legal system. Let's lift those voices. Next up is Emmanuel Andre, the Deputy of Policy and Strategic Litigation in the Office of the Cook County Public Defender.
Hi, I am Emmanuel Andre, Deputy of Policy and Strategic Litigation in the Office of the Cook County Public Defender. I have seen a lot in my dozen years as a courtroom lawyer, and as much of what I have seen has been unfair and unlikely to make any of us more safe. Police searches and prosecutions of gun permit rule violations are done in the name of bringing peace. They do not. Race, ethnicity, age, geography, and community standing result in vastly different likelihoods of being able to obtain a gun permit, and accordingly, vastly different likelihoods of being caught violating a gun permit law and being subject to the administrative, municipal, and the criminal consequences likely to follow. We know that true peace cannot be built on police and court systems that are driven by inequity and fear while delivering punishments that create new trauma and prevent access to safety and healing. We need to redesign criminal processes that aren't working now. Criminal processes can be improved by emphasizing less harmful system responses to violations at every point in the system, including police deflection of arrests and prosecutorial diversion. Our recommendations include: first, increase transparency around the charging process. Prosecutors should make public what factors are considered when they decide whether to proceed with charges and which specific charges to pursue. Prosecutors should also make public how these decisions are made and by whom. Are all individual prosecutors empowered to make these decisions, or are there specifically designated officials or units? Create a mechanism for information to be shared about the person accused of violating a gun permit law to inform the police and prosecutors before they exercise their charging discretion. Second, reverse the presumption that gun possession cases should be charged as harshly as possible. Instead, begin with the presumption that any gun possession case that can be charged as a misdemeanor should be, if charges are appropriate at all. The current system incentivizes police and prosecutors to arrest and charge in the most punitive ways. Choosing less harmful and more effective responses often is mischaracterized as special treatment. and unsurprisingly doled out in a manner that is at best arbitrary and more than likely perpetuating the racial and social economic disparities of our criminal legal system. And third, expand and encourage diversion and deferred prosecution of people charged with possessing guns without proper permits. We must address the reason some people carry guns without proper permits. Some people, especially young adults in areas of high crime or poverty, may have experienced trauma that contributes to poor decision making. Instead of sending them to prison where there is no rehabilitation, divert them to a second chance and to assistance. Public education, judicial education, and education of other court stakeholders will be required in order to explain the public safety benefits of gun possession diversion programs and support their expansion. We have several more recommendations. Please take time to read our full report at ilblueprintforpeace.org. Stephanie Coleman, who is the Policy Director of the Children and Family Justice Center at Northwestern's Pritzker School of Law, will explain our sentencing and other policy recommendations. Thank you.
What is the law in Illinois governing gun purchases, possession, and use? It's complicated, and that's part of the problem. Illinois has two distinct types of gun permits. That's unusual, and it makes it more complex and difficult for most Illinoisans to understand. Illinois is one of only a dozen states requiring a license to purchase a handgun, and one of even fewer states making gun owners obtain a permit to possess a gun on private property. In half of U.S. states, including 3 of the states that border Illinois, no license of any kind is required to own, purchase, or carry a gun. Adding to the complication and confusion is a new law from 2014 that allows guns to be carried on the street in Illinois while concealed. But you need a permit to do that. When public gun carrying expands, gun violence increases, and our state and our country appear to be feeling these effects today. What should we do? Counting on police action has not and will not decrease the number of guns in public places. Let's be clear-eyed. Handguns have already proliferated around the state. An estimated 2.8 million handguns have been sold to Illinoisans just since 2014. It's no wonder that some Illinois courts are facing a tidal wave of gun possession cases. As long as we have these permit laws, the ones that drive people into court and into prison, all levels of government in Illinois should focus primarily on bringing residents into compliance with our unique gun laws. This will require educating, training, and licensing many thousands of Illinoisans who already have access to weapons but have had insufficient exposure to safe gun practices and to the legal framework around guns in Illinois. As the Illinois Blueprint for Peace explains, government needs to provide robust gun education programs. Government needs to communicate clearly about how to comply with gun laws and the penalties for violation. Illinois should stop characterizing possession of a gun without a permit as violence. It is far from it, but Illinois calls this aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. Today, Illinoisans are inaccurately characterized as violent for behavior that some neighboring states do not criminalize at all. Last, we offer several recommendations aimed at adjusting criminal penalties for both possession offenses and gun violence to better reflect risk and harm while enabling best practices for future safety and healing. Illinois' current penalties create perverse outcomes by focusing primarily on the instrument of harm instead of the nature of the harm itself or the best path to restoration. Our state's scheme of automatic transfers of youth to adult court, mandatory minimum penalties, gun enhancements, and post-conviction registries remove the power of judges to take individual circumstances into account. These practices increase existing racial disparities and primarily increase punishments only for the people least culpable for an offense. These mandatory punishments also shut people out of evidence based sentencing alternatives and jeopardize lifelong access to housing and employment. In short, Illinois gun laws are unique. Several of our lives can help to save lives. The Illinois criminal penalties are harmfully out of step with the rest of the nation. Ours is one of the only states imposing lifelong felony convictions and mandatory prison time for first time unlicensed possession of a loaded gun in public. The impact? Illinois adds years of prison time, wasting lives and resources without measurably reducing violence or increasing justice. This is not healing. There is no rehabilitation. There is no improvement to public safety. For the full list of recommended gun law changes and a further explanation for how to bring peace to our communities, please read the full report at ilblueprintforpeace.org. In closing, meet Anne-Marie Brown, who's co-executive director of Circles and Ciphers, a hip-hop-infused restorative justice organization led by and for young people impacted by gun violence. Anne-Marie is one of the leaders of the Illinois Blueprint for Peace Coalition.
Hi, I'm Amory Brown. I am the co-executive director of Circles and Ciphers, and much of my work at Circles and Ciphers helps spread restorative justice practices in Chicago. I started restorative justice in order to support my sister's reentry into community after being incarcerated, and now it has become a lifestyle for me. It has been an honor to be a part of the coalition that created the Illinois Blueprint for Peace. You have heard many of our recommendations, and I hope you'll review the full report at our website. To recap, 1. Illinois should invest in the health and healing of residents impacted by gun violence. 2. Illinois should redesign the criminal processes by bringing transparency, fairness, and community voice to gun charging decisions in the courts. And lastly, 3. Illinois should improve sentencing and policy integrity by promoting compliance with gun laws and not simply punishing violations. Those points 1, 2, 3 are a very short summation of the Illinois Blueprint for Peace. We need to do all that and more. This is a blueprint. We're not constructing a skyscraper, but it's a blueprint, a guide to building a better Illinois. Just viewing this video doesn't bring peace, but acting on our recommendations can. We need many, many builders to make this blueprint come to life and make us all safer, to build a better future for our children. So please join us, young people in particular. I'm talking to you. During the pandemic, you've lost time with your peers in school, you've lost friends and relatives to illness, incarceration, and violence. You have a unique voice, and we're going to ask you to use it to tell the world in art, in music, and voice what peace means to you and how we can end and must end the violence. To learn more about the Blueprint for Peace and be the first to hear about the project to lift the voice of youth, join us at ilblueprintforpeace.org. Help us bring peace to Illinois.